Hey, everybody. Jeff Siegel here with the Kinda Libertarian podcast. Mr. Mike Turpin, the psychedelic athlete, is here with me once again. Mike, how's it going today, buddy?
It's good. It's good. I'm excited to do a second episode. Did you listen back to the episode, the first one?
Because I'm sure I'm going to be disgusted with how I sounded, and I was so I'm my biggest critic.
Yeah.
I will probably listen to everything we do once we start putting it out here. This is only our second podcast, I'll whip myself later after.
Yeah. I nervously press play. I'm like, oh, geez, I don't know if I'm going to like what I hear of myself. But I gave it a listen mainly because I wanted to see how the audio sounded. Like, I'm sure curious about that side of it, but I'm with you where it's like, sometimes I don't even know. I don't want to hear me tell my own opinions.
Well, it's funny you say that because for years, I've been on stage, I've been on TV, I've been interviewed, I've done a ton of podcasts for other people's podcasts and stuff. And no matter what kind of success I've had in my life, it's never good enough. I'm always like, that sucked. I could have done that better. Maybe it's a driver for me because I'm never satisfied. And I guess for me, that's good because I feel like if I ever get satisfied, I guess that's when I get complacent, and I don't want to be complacent,
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. I'm always looking, like, I am the filter I run things through when I'm thinking about myself is pretty much focusing on what I could do better. So it's inevitably not the most enjoyable, even if it's funny, even if it's good, even if I'm happy for a reaction, say like if it was stand-up comedy or I do well in a match. My filter with myself is how could I have done that better?
Yeah.
So
I think
that could be exhausting.
Success. I think that is the secret to success. Never be satisfied. I'm serious. I really believe that. But who the fuck am I? Hey, listen, I wanted to ask your opinion about something because you are an athlete and you are a fighter. And I want to know what you think about this Jake Paul Ben Askren fight, because everyone was talking shit last week when they showed when they got together and did an interview. And I'm not a fighter, but I watch fights all the time. And my initial reaction was, who the fuck is this guy to think that he can get into the ring with a real fighter? Not that, like, I'm not saying he can't fight, but I just feel like all these fighters have put so much time and effort, given up their lives to do this. And then this dude who has a YouTube channel is like, I want to fight, But then at the same time, I'm like, well, fuck, if he can fight, then who's to say he can't? I've never seen him fight, so I don't know. What do you think about this?
Well, okay, I'll break it down like this. I have several strong opinions. It's a very unique situation because you have Jake Paul, who among celebrities who have made the switch to boxing, you're probably looking at one of the better naturally gifted athletes to not actually come from a very sport. I'm sure he played sports, but as far as like, he's never done this boxing thing. He's probably taking it pretty seriously. I'm not exactly sure how much sparring he's doing. So you have Jake Paul, who is exceptionally a step above the average. For instance, he just knocked out a pro basketball player. Now, again, basketball player, not pro boxer. Very, very different. But a professional athlete is probably going to beat an average Joe at most things that is out of their wheelhouse. So he's inevitably athletic to be able to do that and to knock the guy out cold. He definitely possesses a very important skill in boxing, which is power. He's clearly not afraid to get hit because he's willing to do this match. He looks like a little bit of a goon, somebody who could just take a shot over the head. Right. I picture him absorbing a blow pretty darn well. Okay. Who knows? I'm just saying, gut feeling. I don't like the guy. I'm not a fan, but that's how I see Jake Paul. Now we look at Ben Askren, possibly some of the worst looking striking in high level UFC history. If you just watch Ben Askren's fights, especially in the UFC, not that his striking ever looked great before the UFC, but he had a fight maybe where he went the decision and it was mostly on the feet. I recall he's won a little bit of striking exchanges. His last fight in the UFC, he went against the guy Damian Maia, who, while Damian Maia is a jiu-jitsu guy first and not a boxer first, Damian has shown some pretty good striking skills, and he's been striking for a dozen years or at least 10 years, however long he's been doing MMA. So Ben Askren lost the fight, but he didn't look bad. So he had essentially had I think a 3-round, I don't know if it was the main event, but at least 3 rounds of striking with Damian Maia, and he looked pretty okay, at least with how he did with Damian. So now we're going to say this combines. You have somebody who doesn't look like he has a great ability to knock somebody out in Ben Askren. He has not historically eaten big shots that well. And Jake Paul just looks like a thick, bigger, strong guy. So what you have is Jake Paul probably needs to go out there, bite down, be willing to throw power, to be willing to absorb Ben, try to stay calm and not gas out, but probably just go out there and overwhelm him. Because if it goes much beyond the first couple rounds, Ben's strength is he's not going to get tired. He's going to be comfortable. He's more experienced in fighting. He's more experienced in sports. So I think he gets that combative edge and athletic edge the further he gets a feeler out there. And he's wrestled. Wrestling uses footwork. You can apply a lot of the same footwork and movement and tells, and he's going to have a more sophisticated movement. What he doesn't do as well is throw punches. Big part of boxing. What he might not do as well is absorb damage. Big part of boxing. And lastly on it, who's the betting line favorite? None other than Jake Paul. So you can always get a pretty decent sense on what the general consensus is by looking at the betting line. So it looks like Jake Paul is favored to win, and I would say for those reasons. But in general, I agree. Like, what do you think he deserves to be able to just pick and go like that? Do you think a sport like you for instance, the NFL's never done a publicity stunt like that.
Right.
But I guess boxing, there's even if you don't have an organization, you can just have a boxing match. And I guess as that, it's that celebrity's right. And if he's able to get the draw and he's able to pull the fighter, you kind of got to allow it. It reminds me of like what CM Punk did. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
CM Punk,
yeah.
the WWE wrestler. And he got totally embarrassed in his UFC fight.
Yeah, he did.
He had 2 UFC fights. So how have you seen it? So I can tell you are kind of curious if Jake Paul has really the grounds to even stand across from a high level combative athlete. And do you think there's a chance Ben Askren might go out there and just the experience and everything, it'll be too overwhelming?
So again, like you know more about this than I do. You've actually fought. I just watch fights. I've been watching fights for fucking 20, 25 years. Even back when I was in Baltimore, I used to go watch the amateur fights all the time. I guess for me, I think that Jake Paul's a hothead. Like, but even you watch when they were having an interview, like he wasn't cool, like he wasn't calm, and I feel like that may be his downfall. I mean, I don't know, but I just can imagine him getting in there and just like being so fucking like stressed and ready to go and just like getting gassed after the first round while Askren's just going to toy with him, just on footwork,
Yeah.
and just to stay clear of those big punches. And, maybe he'll just get gassed and that'll happen. I don't know. My thing is, again, it's kind of like, of course he has the right to do it. Anybody has the right to do it. But I know fighters, man, and those guys fucking give up everything to do what they do and to climb the ladder and to even get to the UFC, to get to that point, all the work and sacrifice you have to do to get to that point. Imagine doing that. And this motherfucker who's got a YouTube channel who I've never even seen it, and it just talks shit all the time. And this fucker gets to walk in the ring and get millions of dollars. I don't know, man. I'd be pretty fucking pissed if I was a fighter. But then again, it's who knows, man? Like, what if he gets in there and he wins? Then what? Dude, people are going to go fucking crazy. The mixed martial art community, what do you think, man? I think people are going to be fucking out to get him. And that's going to be great for him because that's just more money and more fights.
Exactly. What it'll do is it'll make somebody who has a little bit better striking credentials than Ben Askren
Yeah.
step up. And it's almost like you want to see him win in a way so he can. This would be very humiliating. Nothing would be better than Ben Askren beating him for sure.
Right.
But I hope that if he, I hope he continues the journey enough to face the humility of going against somebody that he shouldn't be going against.
Right.
You know, it is a stunt. It should look like a Jackass thing. He is handpicking the one fighter he could bit. So this is what it reminds me of. The first ever podcast I was involved in was an MMA podcast. Before I ever trained jiu-jitsu, striking, none of that. And as a stunt for the show, I went into a gym. Now, I was supposed to have a mock kickboxing match and mock jujitsu matches, but I just had mock jujitsu matches. Fortunately, the guy I wanted to kickbox, it didn't work out scheduling. And then I think I got talked into being told, dude, I know you've been in some fights and stuff, but you are not prepared to tell a kickboxer who does this every day to come at you and try and knock your head off. Like, this is a really, really bad idea. Now, like, it reminds me of that. And I know the path that was meant for that role. You're meant to go into the gym and get knocked out. It didn't happen. But if I would have done that kickboxing match or a mock MMA fight, the karma, the poetic justice is giving everybody that pros versus Joes inside look. And it would look like Johnny Knoxville and Jackass. Jake Paul is playing his cards right. He picks a pro basketball player. And now he picks possibly one of the only UFC fighters with somewhat of a name that he could last really even around with probably. Mm-hmm. But it's probably the only guy that he'd be favored against that I can think of. There's a fighter it reminds me of, not that this is like a bit inside baseball, but do you remember Jake Shields? The fighter Jake Shields?
Yeah, of course.
It kind of reminds me, like Ben Askren reminds me a little bit of like a worse Jake Shields on the feet. Because there's just something about it. You know that stereotypical thing when you say a guy punches like a girl? You don't hear that much anymore. But you remember the look of like when a guy doesn't know how to throw a punch, you just think he's doing that little arm punch. And you know, it's ironic. Since doing striking, girls are the ones that actually learn the striking form so much better their first few days. Some guys have trouble throwing the mechanics for a punch. But you teach a girl what to do, and their bodies are, I think, a little bit more adaptable to whipping a punch. So it's actually ironic. But Jake Shields and Ben Askren, I mean, they look like that guy that you would say, dude, you're punching like a girl. Like back in the 90s, that's what you would have said about them. Like when you watch Ben Askren, see, this is the part like the keep it real illness about it. And you would be wrong in assuming this, but have there ever been times you're watching him and you're like, I wonder what would happen if I had to strike with this guy. Would he, I mean, now it might be different because of who you are and how you see yourself, but I remember watching MMA as a fan and I was wrong, but there would just be occasionally you'd see a guy on the feet who looked like they had no clue. And it's like, man, would this guy slaughter me or would I be able to hang with this guy even for a minute? How quickly would they beat you? It was like, you know what I mean? But Ben Askren would be your shot, right? If you had to pick a guy in the UFC with a name, you'd want to box that guy.
I wouldn't even box a fucking trainer, man. Are you kidding me? Listen, I've been to gyms. I've been to gyms where these guys are training, man. I get nervous. I remember going to like fights, the amateur fights, man, and like everyone's cool and I had a great time, but I'd always be a little nervous. I'm like, damn, like if shit blows up in here, like I'm done. I'm fucking out because these guys are no joke. And I guess you know, look, and in all fairness to Jake Paul, I mean, look, I mean, he's just trying to make a living. Like, why should I shit on him? Because he's running a hustle. Everybody's running a fucking hustle. He's not doing anything wrong, right? I mean, he's just going for a shot, and he sees an opportunity to do it. But again, just, you know, knowing fighters and knowing everything they go through, I can understand why so many fighters are like, fuck this motherfucker. He has not earned the right to fight at this level. And again, Askren, I mean, not like Askren's like, you know, fucking Khabib, you know what I mean? But still, like he did all the stuff to get to the UFC. So I don't know. I guess maybe there's a little part of me that thinks it's just a little bit disrespectful to the sport.
Yeah, I 100% I agree with that. And it's like there are millions of guys who have done more as far as within that realm. It's like, I mean, a guy like me would kill for an opportunity to have a match with a
Right.
household name in any form of combat sport, jiu-jitsu, MMA, boxing. If I got the call saying, hey, you get to be a replacement or you get to go against a UFC fighter, it's almost part of the reason why I went down that route of going the psychedelic athlete and all that. Like, it's popular in jiu-jitsu. There's the Eddie Bravo types. There's all that. So I figured it wasn't a bad way to get a name for myself instead of just being the guy who's choking people unconscious at the local tournaments, kind of get a little bit of steam and even that sort of thing. But Jake Paul with the YouTube, it's just it's levels and levels. And he happens to be at the top of that level. It's disrespectful to the sport in ways, but I could definitely see how fighters feel disrespected, especially if they see things through their lens. Oh yeah, they're like, fuck this guy. You see it all the time, because what happens when this kind of thing happens is everyone takes to their Instagram and makes these posts calling these celebrities out, like, I'll box Jake Paul.
Right.
Our coach even like made a Facebook comment. It's like, this shit pisses me off, dude. I would fight that guy in a heartbeat and
Yeah.
show him what's up. And I think there are tons of people who feel that way. So you're definitely right. But it's ironic because I feel like a lot of people who are fans, and, fans have when you questioned your ability to maybe predict a fight, before I was a fighter, I was a fight fan, and I still have confidence in my ability to predict who would win a fight from back when I was watching the most fights. You want to have somebody pick fights, you want to ask somebody to bet on sports, pick the guy who watches sports and takes note on who wins and makes predictions and reflects on how well they did, critical thinkers. So you're more than well equipped to predict fights. The fighters at my gym, even the ones way better than me, they're not well prepared to predict fights unless they put a lot of legwork into watching them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're well equipped to pick, but it's a weird one. What is that in is that in May?
I think it's in April. I think
April, it's coming up.
It's coming up. And see, that's the thing. I don't know if I want to pay to watch it, because I feel like if I do that, I'm giving in to the, you know what I mean? It's like I'm playing, I'm doing what they want me to do, I don't want to do that. But at the same time, it's like, and I feel like a dick saying this, but I want to see Jake Paul get knocked out.
Yeah, that's one to illegally stream.
I mean, I just can't. But you bring up an interesting thing about people like watching fights too and being able to predict whatever. I always think it's funny when I talk to people, like I watch the fight with them and I'll be like, oh, he should do this or he should. And these are people that don't fight, have never trained at all. And it's funny to me too when you see guys on Twitter, Instagram, they're like, I get in the ring with that guy for like $50,000. Now, a lot of these people have never seen a fight in real life, like up close. And I don't think people realize how fucking fast these guys are. Even when you see guys grappling, like I'll see guys grappling, right? And guys that watch the fight with like, oh, what, this is fucking bullshit. They need to get up. I'm like, don't you understand, like everything they're doing, every fucking second of what they're doing right now is strategic, and like a lot of people don't get that. So I think people are talking about the Jake Paul fight, especially people that don't know anything about fighting, and they just, they'll like look at Jake Paul and he's kind of bigger than Askren or whatever. And they're like, and he's been fighting, he's been boxing. I think he can take it. I remember the very first time I saw a fight. It was a amateur boxing match in Baltimore. It's probably like in the early 90s. And I had never seen a fight in real life before. And it happened so fast. I couldn't even follow like what was going on because it was so fast. The speed at which these fighters fight, I don't think people fully are aware of like what that means. Because I'll get in the ring with somebody. It's like, oh, maybe you've gotten a fight in your life and you're fighting some drunk dude at a bar. That's not even in the same wheelhouse, Mm-hmm. It's not even the fucking same thing. And I guess as a fight fan, it pisses me off. I guess that's what it boils down to. People that don't understand the sport and then are just completely like trivializing the time it takes to get to that point. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I should stop talking shit about it because it's like, who the fuck cares? Is Jake Paul fighting Ben Askren? Okay, somebody's going to win. It's not going to be a good fight.
Yeah. Well, just to add one thing before we move on to something you said that's real interesting. That the people who don't understand, and you got a taste of it watching the fight,
Yeah.
but think about this in fighting. Okay, you spend 3 months preparing to fight one person. Okay, you train twice a day, 6, 7 days a week. If you're a high level pro fighter, I mean, really, you should put your all into it. If you're fighting at all, period, you should probably put your everything into it. You're fighting a person who's doing the same for you. You've overcome injuries, you've made sacrifices, you have felt like garbage, all for this one moment that you are like about to do. Sometimes you've cut 20 pounds of water weight the day before for it, which is, let me tell you, it is brutal. Weight cuts are so brutal
Yeah.
that the at least they take your mind off the fight, because how could you think about anything else but that damn sweating and it sucks. So
Yeah.
now you're going to go out there and you're not playing a typical sport. You're playing a sport that can end in 3 seconds. And there's a lot of honor and there's a lot of fear. And it's so bad that people at the highest level get so afraid. In the back room, they need coaching. They need, hey, you're going to do fine. They have nerves. They puke. There was a fight not that long ago. It got canceled because the guy's leg was cramping up in the back. Now, I'm telling you, the nerves set in, the tension comes in, and it's uncontrollable. And yeah, you go out there and all that adrenaline, it's the most adrenaline possible in a sports situation that I could imagine. And you go out there and even the best people, for instance, Francis Ngannou just won the heavyweight championship last night. His first time against Stipe Miocic, which was only, I guess, 2, maybe 3 years ago, they fought for the first time. It was Francis's first title fight. And he went out there and he froze up, not only for that fight, but losing that fight. He gassed heavily in their first fight. It made him go out there in his next fight against Derek Lewis and not be able to throw a single punch. He couldn't throw a strike. He was so shy and nervous. And now he's the best in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. That just gives you an idea of how intense, how scared, how little of, and this is crazy because how little of a taste of that experience you can get in the gym. Because sparring in the gym, a lot of times bigger guys are going to wear bigger gloves, or they're not going to throw full speed. So you're not actually playing your sport. The first thought I ever had in my first fight was, I've never played this sport before. All the training I've done, all the sparring rounds, all the MMA rounds,
Yeah.
it was so not the sport that I was doing, which is trying to kill somebody finally. Especially being a heavyweight, you just can't uncork like that in the gym. The 16-ounce glove and headgear isn't going to save you. You can't fight somebody in the gym when you're dangerous. And that fight is the only time you get to practice that. So it takes a certain type of person. It's a rare breed that can prepare for that well. So that kind of just adds a little insight when people are watching at home. I mean, that person might already be tired and exhausted just from being worked up before they even walk out there. There are so much more nerves and adrenaline than probably the average player gets walking out for the Super Bowl. It's
Well, of
just
course,
a different.
because other guys out there to kill you.
And it can end like that.
Yeah.
It can end like that. And it's the only opportunity. It's like the only, it's crazy how it works. So
well, with the Jake Paul thing, some people were just like, well, he's only doing it for money. And I think that's true too. I don't think he's doing it for for the love of the sport or for like any kind of honor. But again, it's like, I can't say that's wrong to say, well, he's only doing it for money. I mean, I know most fighters don't do it for the money because you don't make any money. It's like a musician. You don't become a musician because you think you're going to make money. You do it because you love it, and it fires you up and makes you feel alive, But if someone wants to do it for money, it's like anything. Like, okay, so let me give you an example. So talking about doing things for money and what does it mean to make money and be vilified for making money, whatever it may be. So last week on Twitter, there was this thing, it was a hashtag that was trending called Tax the Rich. And I put up a little thing. I said, well, how about we just don't tax anybody? And I put my little taxation is theft thing on there, And oh my God, dude, I got attacked like by so many people. They're just like, uh, one person said the reason that there are so many starving children in the world is because of people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. And I'm like, can you explain that to me? Because I'm just trying to figure out how you come to that conclusion. Well, they make all this money, and if they would just look after these people instead of, hoard all their money, then there wouldn't be all these starving children. For me, I'm just like, well, okay, how many jobs are they creating so people can make money to feed their kids? I mean, you can't put that on someone just because they're rich, and in terms of taxing, the common thread was they should be taxed more because they make more money. Where I'm kind of like, well, if I don't want anyone to be taxed at all, but if we're going to have any kind of taxation, because they were saying it would make it more fair, but that doesn't make it fair. It's like, and then there was the interesting thing too. They said, well, these people are wealthy. I'm like, well, you're wealthy to a lot of people in the world. You have a computer, you have a phone, you have access to Twitter right now where you can do all this shit, and Wi-Fi. You know how many people in the world would kill to have access to that? You're fucking amazingly rich compared to these people. But their attitude, and when I say they, it was only a few people, was like, for them, they felt like they get to determine how much money somebody should make. So what if I turn that on you? Okay, you make X amount of dollars. I'm going to tell you a certain percentage has to go to charity. Well, who am I to decide how much goes to charity? It was very interesting. It was a very interesting conversation. The interesting thing the interesting thing about it as well was I wasn't mad at them. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that their intentions, again, we talked about intent last time. I don't think they're trying to, like, their intentions are necessarily dishonorable. I think they like the idea of a world where there aren't starving children, where there's more equality. And I can't disagree with that. It's just like how you get there. And their immediate response is whoever makes the most money needs to be vilified and taxed. And we need to steal more of their money. Well, and it's just it was a weird conversation because a couple of people, I was trying to find common threads. So we would talk about things, and I'd find things that I would agree with them on. I said, well, I agree with you on that. I think that it would be great if we have to have taxation, if it were, a fairer system. And I would pose that question: how do we make it fair for everybody? But then it would always go back to, tax the rich, eat the rich. It's like, dude, one for the rich, I would have a fucking job, man. So, I mean, and maybe it's just, again, this is kind of maybe the libertarian part in me, where I'm just I don't think anyone should be persecuted for being successful. And when I think about the Jake Paul fight, I'm like, should I persecute him for being successful and being able to do this?
It's interesting. I definitely have a similar sort of thought as you. I don't necessarily have much more to say on the Jake Paul side of it,
Mm-hmm.
but an interesting side as far as just somebody blaming these rich people. Number one, you definitely can't blame the individuals as if it's their fault. It's the system in which we are. So you can criticize the government and you can claim you're a socialist, or you can claim you're a Marxist, or whatever you want. And politically, you are of a different view. So that's one thing. You can blame the political system or the game in which we are all playing, or the rules that are there. You definitely can't blame the individual playing by the rule. You can suggest that these people are more charitable. You can suggest. I'm hearing a weird. I'm hearing an echo in my thing. Okay.
I'm not.
Okay, we're good. I'm back. I'm
Okay.
great. I'm good. There was just a second I heard like my voice coming back, so that's why it got weird for a second. So like you can suggest ideas. Oh, it would be nice if more celebrities, more people with money did these things. But my big thing is, why is it just money? Why is money the only way we see success, and the only way we see classes, and the only way? A lot of these people who have this money a lot of them are extremely depressed. A lot of them struggle in all sorts of ways. And you'd be shocked how many people are actually living a generally conceivable better life as a result of not being so wealthy. Of course, there's ways that Elon Musk could probably help more people than he does. Bill Gates, these one percenters. And of course, taking a little bit of their money could be a way to solve problems. But if we made it less mandatory, or my view would be make it less mandatory, less government run, where there's a middleman taking profits and taking benefit, because the government isn't going to do it if they can't have some. So that's the way taxes have worked historically. This is for that. Oh, no, wait, it's also for this. And boom, we said it was just going to be a toll booth for 3 months. Well, now it's for the rest of your life. You're paying a toll to go through there. So I just think that singling out money is the only form. Not that it's easy to see other options and see things through other classes or qualities, but isolating money. And maybe if we were more outward about being as positive as you can, and maybe if these people, instead of blaming Elon Musk, set the precedents and went out and volunteered, because a lot of people don't volunteer who cast it on these celebrities. Maybe if they were more charitable, spent their time being more positive in their communities and within their reaches, and if everybody tried to promote the notion of lifting others up, helping others, if we had a different social sort of perspective, a cultural revolution of sorts, where people just tried to do what they can for others when they can, then it would be promoted, and it would spread, and you would have a better place, and it wouldn't need to be as simple as, well, let's just take all their money. That's a divide. That's going to inevitably make a divide, I think.
It's always got to be an us
that's my
versus them.
take on it.
And I think, maybe there's some envy in there, some jealousy. I feel like when I was younger, I would look at someone who had a lot of money and be envious, or we have something that I wanted. And as I got older, like you were saying, as I got older, I realized, well, it's not about the things that you have, like the material things you have. It's about your life and how you live it. I live around a lot of farms, and most of the people I live near are farmers. Dude, they don't even make minimum wage. They are the happiest fucking people I know. They do something they love doing. They're outside all the time. They love getting their hands dirty, and they got nothing, dude. I mean, there's people I know that are 40 years old that are living in houses where they have roommates and stuff because they can't afford their own place, but they don't care, because for them, what makes them happy and fulfilled is being out in the field and working with the animals and working in the dirt. I think there's a lot to that. I've definitely spent some time on the farms, just volunteering, because I like going out there sometimes and getting my hands dirty. And there are definitely times I've been out there and I thought, man, I could get into this. Like I think I could enjoy doing this for a living. Now I have responsibilities. I couldn't just get up and do that. But at the same time, I think you hit on something really, really important. If we weren't so obsessed with money and things, do you think that people would be less angry at billionaires?
Yeah, I do. It actually reminds me, when you're talking about this whole thing, is that you spent a period of time, to which you told me off the podcast, you missed being in a band where you were practically, if not starving, you guys were not making money, and you were a touring artist. You made so many sacrifices. Why? To do what you loved to do. Right. And I don't know if this is the male white privilege that I cannot see in myself, but I just look at all the things I could do more, where if money was my number one goal, I probably could find ways to make money, at least in the United States. So my question would be, well, number one, if you're going to be if you think that there's this issue, how do you see the problem? Do you see it nationally, or do you see it globally? Because if you see it nationally, we need to look at how hard is it really? How hard is it really to make a living for yourself and make enough money to be comfortable on that side of things if you really put your energy into it? because what holds people back is that there, a lot of people might blame their depression as to why they can't make money, other sorts of things. So what is our problem? What do we need help with? I don't think it's just this money that's so hard to achieve. It's the fact that people can't seem to bring themselves to use their energy towards this goal that they feel is so important to them. Because if money is that important to you, I truly believe that if you spent every day all your free energy on making it, you would find it.
That's a very good point, man. That's a very good point. Now, I will admit, that we're not all dealt a fair hand in life. There's no doubt about it. When you're born, you can be born into wealth. You could be born into poverty. You could be born into a family of abusers. You could be born into a family of addicts. You could be born to, into a family of loving, caring parents. It's a roll of the dice, So when people, there are definitely people that it's harder for them to kind of escape a world of shit, for lack of a better word, because they're surrounded by so many negative influences. So I understand that for me anyway, I do have privilege. My parents were great. They loved me. They took care of me. We weren't rich, but we were richer than a lot of other people. I mean, I always had food to eat. I never went hungry. I always had clothes to wear. I always had a roof over my head. So I think that those kinds of things need to be taken into account. And I kind of wish that this kind of almost like this new wave of, steal from the rich and give to the poor attitude was less about money and more about purpose. What is it you really want? If you really want equality, is money, more money, going to give somebody more equality? Because I can give, there are definitely people in the world who had nothing, and then they end up making a ton of money. And like you said, are they happy? Are they still equal? I mean, Dave Chappelle said it. He's like, nobody. He said, how many people in this room would want to, change places with me? How many white people? And nobody raised their hand. He's like, and I'm fucking rich. He's like, so even if you're rich, it's like, if I were black, I would be, every time I get pulled over by the cops, I'd be like, fuck, is this the day that I die? That's a fucking horrible, I can't even imagine living that way, but that's a reality. So I think those things need to be taken into account when we talk about equality. It's not money. You can be the richest person in the world, but if you have some like strikes up against you when you start, whether it's because of the color of the skin or the environment in which you were born, that's going to weigh on you. So I just wonder, and I wish I knew these people. I wish I knew these people that would that debate me on social media, because I want to know, like, where do you get this from? Like, what was your upbringing? Have you struggled? Do you struggle? Do you care that you struggle? Is it a struggle? You mentioned being on the road was a real struggle. For me, I didn't make any money. I sacrificed a lot, but I never ever thought of it that way. The whole time I was on the road, never did I wake up and go, oh, I got to struggle today. Never fucking thought about that, because what I was doing was the one thing I always wanted to do in my entire life. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a musician and be on the road. So even on the shittiest days on the road when we didn't get paid, or, my equipment broke and I was like, fuck, how am I gonna get the money to get this fixed or something like that? Even on those days, I was still happier in that situation than I would have been if I was sitting behind a desk all day.
Yeah. No, I agree. As somebody who, I mean, I've spent far more money on martial arts than the sliver of any money I have ever made in
Mm-hmm.
martial arts. Right. And I've spent so much time and energy, but I don't think of it that way. I go and perform at an open mic every week for the past, 2 years. And for a while I was practicing every single day until I got good enough to do that, or to where I could even try to do it. So it never seemed like I was doing anything that wasn't, I wanted more of that, more of this. It wasn't even how can I make money doing this? It's just, man, how can I spend all of my time doing this thing and these things that I love so much and I'm so passionate
Mm-hmm.
about? I want to do more of that. And yeah, it would be nice to have the money and the funds to live your dreams to the fullest. But there's definitely more to it than just the solution of that. I respect people who really are about that. Like you said, you would like to talk to the people who feel this and argue this way, because I do think a lot of them are doing it. A lot of them are doing it out of the kindness of their hearts and
Right.
out of values that they probably believe in spiritually, very deep in them. They feel very, very strongly about this thing. And they would probably think that somebody like you, somebody like me, we don't empathize for others. We aren't considerate of
Right.
others. I totally get that I've been dealt an awesome hand, but hey, even the worst situation here in this country is a lot better than situations in other countries. Even here, and this might sound silly, even here in this species, human beings, we have it a lot better than others. So like, how big is your scope of consideration? At what level do you want equality? Do you want it globally? Do you want to consider animals more? Do you want to consider how far are you really willing to take it? Because if you just take it as far as the American government, the richest people need to give money to the lowest people, there's still a heavy, heavy line of not being able to see the forest for the trees, that
Mhm.
that not being able to, yeah, it's some sort of prejudice or some sort of ignorance or in consideration or exclusion, especially if you aren't willing to see it as a global perspective. So do we want to, like, you know, how the Dave Chappelle thing, how you brought up not about these white people not wanting to be Dave Chappelle, even though he has it great. It's like, yeah, we may want to do better for our country, but do we want to include all of the countries out there where, I mean, do we want to raise the situation of everybody equally? What do we really want? You know, what are your goals? I think there are a lot of people who do it out of the kindness of their heart, and there are a lot of people to do it because they feel like it's their only hope. It's their only option, is that somehow they would be able to live off of some sort of redistribution, all that. I think
Right.
lot of my friends who get caught up in, I have a lot of friends who are my age, maybe a little younger, who are still, maybe they've rode out academia really far and they're kind of caught up in this Marxist perspective. They don't have anything going for themselves. Maybe they were a professor for a year and then it fell through and they
Mhm.
didn't even make any money when they did that. And they didn't know what to do. They hadn't made the transition to real life application. They had spent their entire time in school. Now they can't get a job. And what must happen? I don't know, but this communism stuff sounds good. Is
Right.
sort of what I, you know, that's what I see a lot of in my
Yeah,
circle.
I kind of wonder too if it's just like I don't know if it's like a lot of younger people maybe that are, because I'm sure like when I was younger I was far more into the idea. I would have been easily pulled into that. Well, of course, this makes sense. Redistribute the wealth. Why wouldn't you do that? Well, at 18, that makes a lot of sense because you haven't really learned yet, how economics work, how freedom and equality really does work. The big thing about equality, people will say, oh, what did someone told me, they said in this conversation, they said, I said taxation is theft, and they said profit is theft. And I said, well, in free market capitalism, the idea is the exchange of goods or services, a voluntary exchange of goods and services, for whatever kind of compensation it may be. So if I sell you something and I make a profit, but you get something of value, I didn't steal that from you. It was an exchange, and it was so aggressive. It was so like, how dare you? It's like profit is theft. No one should be profiting off the backs of these workers. I'm like, I've worked since I was fucking 14 years old, and I wanted to work because I wanted to earn a living. I wanted to make money so I could do things. I personally don't have a problem with that. If you have a problem with it, that's fine. Like, you do whatever you want. Like you said, go become an academic. You won't make a lot of money, but you'll be fulfilled, supposedly. um, my uncle was a college professor, and he did that for almost 50 years. He's never made a lot of money, but he loved what he did. I don't think he ever did it for the money. He did it because he was passionate about it. So maybe, do you think there's a lack of passion out there?
Yes. That kind of goes back to what I was saying. A lot of these people maybe who would claim depression, the motivation stuff, they feel like but a lot of these people aren't willing to. It's a weird thing because you would probably argue that being libertarian probably sets you up to be more pro small business in a way, right? Like you would think that framework more than hard Democrats, you would probably think it would be easier, or I would imagine economically, the taxes, all this stuff, at least the things that small business people I know talk about, it seems
Mhm.
a bit more fiscally conservative if you are having that small business in mind. But I find it ironic that my same friends who are anti right in every single way and are ultra left uh, fiscally, they're the same people who are like, but well, I'll never work for corporation. I don't want to work for Amazon. I don't want to work for this. I don't want to work for, like, all of the jobs and all of the options. I see it all the time on Facebook. They say,
Right.
hey, if anybody knows of a job that's hiring, here's my experience. Here's what I can do. And people will give them all of these options out there that it's probably enough to really make some okay money if you put some effort into it. No, I could never work for that. I could never. They have all these ideas, and
Mhm.
it goes. It's like other versions of not wanting to work for Chick-fil-A, right? It's like that, but for different reasons. Amazon's probably a pretty good example. They're always hiring. They're always growing, and maybe somebody does have the ethics where they're like, I do not want to work for that company, and they probably have good reason, but
Mhm.
they're living within the framework that they're living in, and I just don't understand. I think it's people who, it's a weird contradiction to me because it seems like the system that they want promotes the idea of this sort of big corporation monopolizing everything, but they don't want to be a part of that. Does that mean, I don't know. So you know more about the financial side than I do. So
Right.
maybe, yeah, whatever you think on that, I'm curious.
Well, it's funny. We just a little while ago you talked about privilege. That is one hell of a privilege to live in a world where you get to decide where you want to work based on your ethics and your morals and your principles. I mean, how many places? Think about 12-year-old kids in Africa mining cobalt, you know, so their parents can get 10 cents a day. That's some real shit right there. They don't have that privilege. And I'm not supporting that at all. I think it's a horrible situation. Maybe we need to be not just a little more have embrace our passions a bit more, but also be a little more grateful about what we have. And again, look, I'm a white dude who's done very well. So it's very easy for me to say that. I understand that. But I also have the right to say it too, because I think there's truth to it. I think there is truth to that. Um, you're talking about your friends who are like, well, I don't want to work for Amazon or a big
Yeah.
corporation. You know, that's fine, man. Stick to your guns. I will back you up 100%. Um, and if you want to talk shit about those companies and don't go to Walmart to buy your shit, good, man. That because you're living the way you want to live. But let's not lose sight of the fact that wow, you live or we live in a society where I can go online and have hundreds of jobs to choose from. They may not be the best jobs in the world. They may not pay a lot, but boy, that's one hell of a privilege right there.
That's a very good point. No, I agree with that completely. And it reminds me of in the first episode when you brought up the vegan thing and maybe not wanting to look at it from the full perspective in that how many animals are killed, the rabbits sticking their head up, getting how
Right.
many animals die in the name of veganism, or not just in the name, but how many people who are vegan are accidentally killing animals and not realizing it. It's like, I get that you have an ethical hang up. And like you said, I'm very proud of people who stand up for things, and most of them are for the right reasons. It is
Mm-hmm.
the right thing to do to be like, screw Walmart. But you have to remember the ways in which you're not like that. So your hang up is preventing you from getting the one thing that you say you need, money, more money. You're not willing to compromise there, but where did your cell phone battery come from? Oh, is it made of lithium ion? Huh, where does that come from? Oh, wait, child slave labor overseas where Africans are dying and babies are doing this and these. Oh,
Right.
we'll do that. Yeah, sign me up with Verizon or sign me up with this company because I have to, but I don't have to work for Amazon because you see that it's like they're not willing to see all the ways they're already
They're already a part of
enabling.
this. Yeah. Well, I had that conversation with one of those people on Twitter, this guy was like, "Well, Elon Musk is he's mining cobalt in Africa, and all these kids are dying, and this and that." I said, first of all, I know for a fact that Elon Musk has gone on record saying we're trying to find better sources of cobalt so we don't have to go to these places in Africa, which is why you're seeing a big move, a lot of investment going into mining in North America, Canada, particularly parts of the U.S., and even in some parts of Europe, because a lot of these companies do want to source the materials in a more responsible way. Second, you're going to complain about that, but okay, so then drive your internal combustion vehicle. You don't think people are getting killed, because of the exploration of oil? How many people die every day, from pollution that comes from internal combustion vehicles? Unless you want to go to an agrarian society, which I would argue that most of these people, and I don't know them, but I feel pretty strongly that most of them couldn't last 1 hour doing the kind of work that I know these farmers do every single day, or they'd want a lot of money to do it and want 3 breaks per day. That's not how it works. Farmers don't work an 8-hour day. They work a fucking 12 to 15-hour day, 6 days a week. So we have choices. Whether or not you choose to take advantage of the choices, that's up to the individual. And if someone wants to argue and point figures at rich people and demand answers from the government, that's your right, man. Go for it. But in the meantime, what I'd rather do is make enough money to take care of myself and my family, and just try to be a better human. If I can do that, I think I'm being pretty successful.
Yes. And if you're not doing that, maybe taking care of that before you try to solve the world for everybody or do all that, it might be good to fix yourself so you're in a better position to help others. You might
Mhm.
want to try to align with that perspective. Something I just thought of, I meant to mention earlier is that I don't know if you've heard of this. I don't know the specifics. I saw it when it first came out. There's a documentary on the happiest people in the world, right? And
Mhm.
and they happen to be one of the most poor, I think, or one of the most worst off by certain standards, and yet they're the happiest group of people. I don't want to misspeak, but the name of the documentary is either Happy or Happiness,
I
one of
think,
the two.
yeah, weren't they like in Siberia or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
That sounds right. But it's just an interesting thing to point out. And what are we really after when we're after the notion of redistribution of wealth, of fairness? What measuring tools can we use? Of course, money is one of them. Let's not stop using that tool. But
Mhm.
what other tools can we use to sort of this overarching equality or goal? What other factors are there? And then I think it at least gets people seeing that it's not just as simple as this whole money thing. Whether or not you still think that is fine, but come on, you can't blame these people for the things that they're doing and making it seem like that's what's wrong with the world. There are a lot of imbalances in the world and a lot of things wrong with the world. Your cell phone battery is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, have you ever done this? Have you ever thought about, and I've never done this, I'm just thinking about it now. Like if you said, what would make me happy? Like if I wanted to be like the happiest person in the world right now, what would have to happen for me to be the happiest I've ever been?
Hmm. I bet a lot easier of a time talking to girls. I don't even want a fair. I don't even want to be more attractive. I don't even want to have a better shot. I just want to be able to shoot my shot with more girls comfortably.
You know
All
what's
right.
funny? Before I was in a band, I couldn't. They say I couldn't get laid in a morgue. You know what I mean? Like I could never talk to girls. I was always terrified. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And then I was on the road, and all of a sudden, like all these beautiful girls were just like not throwing themselves at me, but they were making it very fucking easy. You know, and it gave me a certain set of a sense of confidence that I never had before. And with that self confidence came success with women. I think not that I'm like a womanizer or anything. I haven't like having with tons of women or anything like that. But and the one thing that I learned while I was on the road, and it was just by chance, but I found that most of the women that I've dated and met and that liked me were women that I had conversations with. Like when I would talk to them, I wasn't like trying to get laid. You know what I mean? I would like have actual conversations. So I remember being on the road and people would be like, yeah, Jeff, like, he like pulls some pretty hot chicks, like, and I would be like, I not doing anything. People would come backstage and I would just, start talking to people. And then sometimes they'd be really pretty, and I would spend that, a couple of hours just hanging out and talking to them and asking them questions and getting to know them. Dude, by the end of the night, they're like, when can I see you again? It's like, okay, so apparently the secret to meeting women is to actually talk to them, be interested in their lives, and don't talk about yourself so much. And like, don't try to bang them right away. You know what I mean? Just be like,
Yeah.
cool. That was a long time ago. I don't have a lot of beautiful women come up to me these days because I'm not on stage anymore. But that's okay. Anyway, but I digress. I didn't want to pull away from what you were saying. But okay, the ability to meet women easier would be one thing. Okay,
Yeah.
what else?
I'm kind of a backwards, and this actually explains my political leanings, because it definitely, this just hit me. I always have thought that I am the perfect candidate to not work and just be a hobbyist. I'm so into hobbies. I have all these things I want to be better at. I have the unlimited energy outside of the time I need to sleep to do things like practice an instrument, like practice learning how to fight. All of my hobbies, I would want to write. I would want to make movies. I want to make music, not just music. I want to make a rap album, a folk album, a metal album. I want to learn every instrument. I want to know how to mix and master and record. I want to podcast every day that I want to podcast. I love all of that stuff. Like, I am that guy. And what better way to do that than outright communism? No, not quite. But I mean, but separately, the reason I don't align is because of my absolute punk rock attitude towards government, and my that sort of borderline anarcho, at least critically, the way I see government and the way I see politicians, and the lack of integrity, the lack of ethics, whatever it is. We could go really far down that route. But so that is my dream, would be able to do all of these things. A lot of people, I look at somebody who's great at music, somebody who's been playing guitar for a long time. They have an amazing singing voice, right? They have all this talent, and they don't practice. They don't record songs. They don't write their own music. They don't even memorize the cover songs that they do. They don't put any effort into it. Maybe at one point in time they did. Maybe slowly over time they got this way. Maybe a lot of it came naturally, but whatever it is. And when I see somebody like that, I'm thinking, oh my God, what I would do if I had their abilities. Because
Mhm.
I'm really good at making the most of what I'm currently able to do when it comes to a lot of different things. But I'm always, like you said, what did we say at the beginning of the podcast about being satisfied? I think that we were talking about that after we started recording, right? That was during the podcast, right? Not being satisfied and constantly looking to get better. Oh yeah, listening back to the podcast. I
Okay.
asked about it, and the reason
Oh
you
yeah.
need to listen back, and the inner voice constantly looking to get better. Yeah, that is my absolute dream. I could do that until I die. I would love to have lots of money. I would love for Elon Musk to write me a check of a livable wage and I would have all the energy in the world to do all of these things. So that kind of explains maybe the type of person that I am and the types of ways that I enjoy spending my time. And I make a lot of sacrifices to do all of these hobbies and to try to do all of these things. And I love every second of it. And money is linked to none of it. You know, I have other means of making money. So
Well, I mean, clearly you got into the fight game for the money because, you know, you make so much
yeah,
money.
yeah. Ah, I wish that, yeah. But when you put the effort into it, eventually you got to the point where if you weren't making a lot of money through music, you probably could have seen directions or ways that being this experienced musician who had done some live, all the experience of the live stuff, all of your tenure, your accolades, you probably could have found a way if it were your goal and if it were completely about money. It wouldn't maybe be the amount of money you could make in other avenues, but you could see ways that you could have made that your profession because you put so much passion and effort into it. And you probably did get to the point where you were making money in other ways, or at least I've seen you've been involved in other things
Right.
post being an active touring band member and all that. And you've maybe at least seen other people who are keyboardists and they do things for musical scores. They send out a reel here, whatever it is, teaching. You can always teach what you know. So if you
Yeah.
get good enough at knowing something and understand learning enough, you're a smart guy. You could easily instruct others. So there are ways to develop your passions into the money, but it definitely takes some time putting your all into it. There's
I
something
think I,
about putting your all into anything. That's a skill in and of itself. You
yeah,
know?
yeah, you have to. And I think that's what happened with me towards the end of my music career was that I didn't feel I was still putting into it, but I was starting to lose that passion. You know, I was no longer getting excited about going on the road. And it wasn't that I didn't want to perform. It's just that I felt like we hit a brick wall, and I felt like there was no way to get around that brick wall at that point. So I had to either stick with it and see what would happen, or take another route. Looking back on it, and again, it's hindsight. There are a lot of things I could have done differently that would have made it far more successful. But for whatever reason, I didn't know any better at the time, or I didn't take the time to figure it out, and I took a different path. And I can't say I regret the path that I've taken because it's been very fruitful in many ways. But there's always going to be a part of me that's like, man, like I really did have the perfect situation. Um, and I think I lost sight of that. And when I lost sight of that, it just went downhill. So,
Yeah.
you make decisions and you live with them. Sometimes they're good decisions, sometimes they're bad decisions. But whatever the decision is, you move on and you figure out how to get to the next place you want to get to.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've put my all into jujitsu for a long stretch of time, especially since my last fight. But since I've joined up at this gym, I've at least put my all into the MMA spectrum and all that. And now my ability to put my all into anything is better. I am a better landscaper as a result of having a better work ethic in this environment. I will be better at anything I put my mind to. I will be a better podcaster. I will I was talking to my buddy who he works at like the local music shop because he's in a local band and they are big in cover bands. He's in an original band, and that's sort of his passion side. He wants to do music lessons, but he has this job. It's not a ton of money. And I said, dude, you better be Mr. fucking Musicland. That's the name of the store. I said, you better be Mr. Musicland. You show up and you do that job to the best of your ability, and it will wear off into other avenues of your life. You will be the best band member as a result. You will be the best partner as a result. You have got to learn how to be the best at the things that you do and let them mean a lot to you. And that is what goes back to the passion that you were talking about. Putting my all into something, especially things that don't give me easy return, like martial arts. Maybe they don't even give you any return sometimes in some ways, It's just putting your all into something, period. That's what it feels like a lot of times. And it helps me to know now that I've done that. If you said, all right, Mike, for the next 4 years, you're going to be a car salesman, bro, I'm going to apply that damn jujitsu energy. I'm going to apply that damn MMA energy, and I'm going to make some fucking money. You know,
I just had an image. I just had an image of you like getting some guy in a triangle and be like, "You're gonna fucking buy this car."
yeah, yeah. But you know, you doing what you did and making the sacrifices that you did and making that brave step instead of waiting for somebody to reach their hand out and lift you up the steps. You doing that has made you probably so much more ambitious, so much more of a wild card. I mean, even you were describing your job to me where you were like, it's almost like you got this job that a lot of people probably have more credentials, or at least some point in your history, you had work due to passion, mentorship, those sorts of things, and just being damned good and just knowing your shit. And that's kind of the way I've been with strength and conditioning as a coach. You know, I was working with the best lacrosse kids in the nation at a school, Boys Latin, for several years pre-COVID. They were the top-ranked team in high school. A lot of them go straight to D1. And you know why I got that job? Because the guy hiring knew that I was somebody who knew what I was doing. He didn't even say, "Show me your certification." He didn't say anything. No questions asked. I believe in you. You're the man for the job. And that's something that putting that energy into that band, touring the way you guys did, recording, being meticulous, all that things, it has probably shaped you into being so much more. And if people could just start putting their all into their days, into their activities, into their everything, it's crazy what it molds you into. You know,
So
yeah.
imagine people that are saying tax the rich or eat the rich or profit is theft. If they took all that energy and instead of just being on Twitter and yelling at people, decided, I'm going to start a co-op because this is in line with my values, or I'm going to go, I want to see equality. So I am going to work at a nonprofit, where we seek to, help people find safe housing. There are avenues out there where you can actually get your hands dirty and do it. And I guess again, I don't want to talk shit about people because I don't think they have bad intentions, but at the same time, and I think we've discussed that at length now. It's about how you turn those intentions into action. And being on social media and just talking shit and telling everybody to tax the rich, you are accomplishing nothing. You're not accomplishing anything in terms of making the world a better place. I have no, obviously you can make your voice heard on those places, but boy, if you say you really care about equality, fair housing is a very big issue in this country. Apply your passion to that. And
Yeah,
so
dude,
says the word of Jeff Siegel.
I'll tell you, that might be the point of the podcast. What you just said is the exact point that I think we've been generally beating around, but the way you just said it, it's almost like, oh, I get that you think this about Elon Musk, and I get that you think this about these rich people, and I get that you think that they're the problem, but all right, let's take a second. You have problems in your life. You know people who are in a situation where they have problems in your life. You don't have the time or the energy to be wasting it the way you are. What the hell are you doing writing this Twitter comment right now that means absolutely nothing, that gets absolutely nothing done? What an inefficient way to spend your time. What an inefficient waste of time that you are doing. And you're going to go to bed at night thinking you're a better person because you told someone off and you didn't make a shit of difference.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I would say it,
And it's funny because I guess I could be guilty of the same thing of being on Twitter and responding and saying things. But
yeah.
One of the things that I like to do, and this sounds pretty sad. So I work all day, man. I'm up at 5:00, 5:15. That's when I start my day. I go right to work. I got to take care of my kids after that, get them ready for school, get them fed, get them to school. And then I come into the office and I work. At 10:00, I go do my CrossFit workout. That's like an hour between stretching, doing the workout, and getting back. And then I work. up until the market closes, and a little bit after that, actually Zip calls, so about 5 o'clock. Then I go home. Then I help make dinner and do the dishes and make sure my kids do their homework and get them to bed. When I am done all that, I sit down, I smoke a joint, and I just get online and look at Facebook, and I go on Twitter, and I like to see what people are doing and talking about. And sometimes when I see people making comments, I'm like, I really need, and of course I'm high, so I'm like, I really got to comment on this. I do that. That's like a pastime I do for about an hour, and then I go to bed. And the only time I really have for passion things like this podcast is like the weekend, or if I want to play my piano, I do it on the weekend. I'm not complaining at all. It's just how my life is right now. So I don't want to sit there and say that I don't know what these people are doing. Maybe they're just like me, maybe they work all day. Still, I'm suspicious of people that spend so much time on social media, espousing this stuff. And I guess that's really why I like to meet them. I want to forge a union with these people. I want to work with them, not oppose them. That's one of the problems I've always had with the Libertarian Party and people in the Libertarian Party is they're very condescending. So they would see something like that and just attack people. Let's not attack people. Let's see where we have commonalities, and work together on those things. I think you get a lot more done, and you're not quite as angry all the time. Don't you think? Like, people are just so fucking angry all the time. I was angry as a kid. I was an angry, punk rock kid. So
Right.
but as you age, you're kind of like, well, yeah, I'm still angry, but do something better with that anger.
Yeah,
Which makes me. That's why I think I'm usually talking to people that are very, very young.
yes, that's a big point, or at least not in as far along in certain parts of their life, maybe. Definitely younger, probably. And
Yeah.
I want to make it clear too, when I say that or make that kind of firm criticism, I mean, it's hypocritical in ways for me to say it, right? Like
Right. We're all
I'm
fucking
talking,
hypocrites, man.
yeah. So I don't want to make it seem like, how dare you waste your time like this and not
Right.
spend the energy for the cause. But at the same time, when you do look at action and when you do look at getting things done, I mean, you don't want to just tout off who you are, but at the same time, you've spent a lot of energy and you've put a lot of work into the things that you're passionate about. Music is only one of them, whether it's about clean energy or the passions in your career. You've done a lot of things that are taking action for what you believe in. And just like you're doing now, trying to speak and, put your political standing, your social views, all these sorts of things, you're trying to take action with it in a lot of ways. So
Mhm.
I think there's a balance, and I dick around online all the time too and waste time, but that doesn't mean it's not wrong. If you have shit you got to get done, man, you got to get it done. We don't
Yeah.
do it. We don't get it all done, but you got to. It's just
Yeah.
the way life is.
It's true. You have to get it done, or you have to yell at rich people and say, share the wealth.
Yeah, and to make the common ground thing, I guess the last big point on this for me, or I know it's been going a while. I don't care how long we record, but I know it's been a while, so I don't want to keep rambling forever. But I think it's very important to point out that I think anybody who believes in somewhat of a shift of the current situation probably has very, very good intentions. And I've often thought from the polar opposite spectrums, whether it's complete anarchist perspective or extreme, that sort of Marxist, extreme left perspective, or the in-betweens, the somewhat socialist, somewhat libertarian, some this and that. At the very least, I think people who think there needs to be something done and change to be happen, they're probably in it for similar reasons, and we're a lot more similar than we realize as far as the caring nature of the way we are, the things we try to consider, the things we try to juggle. And it's very confusing to come up with the right solution and to have a good vision for it. That everyone has ignorance. We need each other to know what's best. And it's very hard to know. It's a very difficult thing to get right, is trying to say the way government should be, to say the way we as people should be. It's a very conflicting. It sucks. It sucks to try and think of what is wholly right. So I think there's more common ground between the left and the right. I think the key thing is realizing that things probably should be a bit different.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't look at the state of the world today and be like, yeah, this is fine. It's not.
Right.
We're better than this. I know we're better than this. I really believe we are better than this. But propaganda is a profitable thing, man. And a lot of the politicians, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, it's a hustle, man. It's a constant hustle. How can I get that campaign money in? How can I make sure my party wins? How can I stay in office? Very few of those politicians are really in it for honorable well, I don't say honorable reasons, but there are a lot of them that stoke the fire of hostility and resentment, and that's what makes it worse. So it would be great if we could see beyond that when we have these conversations on social media and talk to people with respect, even if we disagree with them, see if we can find that common ground. And if the person you're talking with is just throwing hatred and vitriol at you, you just say, okay, and then you just move on because it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Well, on that note,
yeah.
Hey, this was a great podcast today. I really enjoyed talking about Jake Paul and the Jake Paul, the Askren fight that's coming up. Not so much about the fight, but just kind of getting your perspective on it as a fighter and being able to talk about that a little bit. And of course, just kind of the banter, and hopefully people that are listening enjoy it. And if you don't listen.
Yeah. And if you're watching,
but we're going to be back.
Yes. If you're watching next time, I want to change I'm like looking at my background and I'm like, I need to do something to the wall that is behind me and be in front of a cooler wall. So next time, I promise I will have a cooler wall. I'm looking at the whole time. I'm like looking at this, like the Devil's Harvest thing behind you. And I'm like, God, I need cool shit behind me. So next time I'm really going to have some cool shit going.
That's the only thing I have in my little tiny office is that. And my favorite thing is when I'm having meetings with investors, because I mean, I've made a pretty good name for myself. So I'm not at a place where I have to impress anybody anymore. So I love when I talk to like some of these, more, well-off conservative investors that are, great people, but, they don't really know who I am. They just know that I can help them make a lot of money, which is fine. But then they see that, what's that thing in the back there? What's Devil's Harvest? I'm like, well, let me tell you a little something about propaganda and cannabis, and sometimes they're just like, yeah, can we move on? Sometimes they're just like, that's fascinating. We have great conversations. It's a great conversation starter.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is really badass that you do that. I respect that a lot. So that's cool.
Well, I don't think I would have done that, 10 years ago when I was still trying to work my way up. But now I'm like, I don't really give a fuck anymore. I'm good.
Yeah.
It's nice to be in that place. So, all right, cool. Well, Mike, we will do this again next week. Thank you everybody for listening. Until next time, be safe.